All right. So one of the things that I need to teach is how do you take things that you've said in your research and that you've copied or like quoted or paraphrased or whatever you did as part of your research for this research paper. How do you take those chunks of information once they're in the outline and turn them into actual paragraphs? Well, in the top right part of the screen, I have a notebook that's live here, and the concept that I'm going to teach is called paragraphs or sandwiches. And by paragraphs or sandwiches, what I mean is that every paragraph should have a topic sentence, and that should be your bread. That topic sentence really ought to lead the reader into what your research is about. Secondly, meat and cheese is basically your research and your information. And sometimes you've got to like describe why it's important. You need to put it into your own words as best as you can. And at the same time, you need to cite that information. The third thing that I wanted to point out then is you have to have a second layer of meat and cheese in a body paragraph, which means more research and more information. Now, one of the rules that we have here is that there should be a minimum of 2 layers of meat and cheese in every body paragraph. However, you're welcome to do 3 and sometimes 4 depending on the length and the depth of the information that you have, as well as keeping like things together. That was one of the big rules, was we wanted to keep like information together. Once we have the information together, then we can put it into the sandwiches that we want to serve as part of our informative research paper. So we're going to start with paragraphs or sandwiches here. Now to the left of the screen, what you actually see are examples of notes that I have taken from a resource. In fact, these are actually my note cards from source number 1. And this is source number 1, greenhouse gases. We got it from Gale Global Issues Online. So this is the actual information that we're going to work with today. So what I need to do is I need to serve bread, meat, cheese, and then more bread. I'm actually going to serve 3 layers of meat and cheese in this paragraph to kind of show you what I'm thinking of when I go through this. Well, if I'm looking at the research, carbon dioxide is the most prevalent greenhouse gas that is anthropogenic, meaning that it comes from human activity. The second piece of information was that fluorinated greenhouse gases are different because they are synthetic and are, quote, typically the most potent at trapping solar heat and usually remain active longer in their naturally occurring counterparts. And then the third piece of information that I took was examples of greenhouse gases include chlorofluorocarbons, and let's see what their suggestion is. Yeah, we'll go ahead and use Google's suggestion for that one. But examples of greenhouse gases include chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, carbon dioxide, and methane. So I'm looking at my 3 pieces of information, and the 3 pieces of information have one thing in common. They're all general information about greenhouse gases. So what are the most common greenhouse gases and what are their features? So basically, I'm going to look at this information and I'm going to go, okay, I got to write a topic sentence for this. So for me, it's pretty simple. The topic sentence is going to probably have to be about greenhouse gases. So going into my notebook here, I'm going to go ahead and write what I think is a decent topic sentence for this particular subject. So topic sentence we're going to start with is going to be, there are many types of greenhouse gases. I'm going to double space even on the, and actually in the United States we have to put 2 S's. In England you put 1 S. So there are many types of greenhouse gases that affect the atmosphere. Okay? So I think then the most logical thing that I should start with, and that tells the reader the entire paragraph is about greenhouse gases that affect the atmosphere. What I think is not a bad place to start is the examples of greenhouse gases. So I think I'm actually going to roll with that piece of information. Now, just for the illustration of rules, these all came from the same source. In the case that all of your information from the paragraph comes from the same source, you'll only need to cite the parentheses like 1 time, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to start with this piece of information right now with our paragraph. So I'm going to say, specifically, examples include chloro, fluoro, and I'm going to have to do a dash, carbons, carbon dioxide, and methane. Now, I can keep that as is in my paragraph because I already paraphrased that. I'd already put that into my own words. Now, I'm not going to cite it yet because all three of the pieces of information that I'm using came from the exact same source. So now the next thing that I need to do is I need to decide which is the next piece of information from this list of three that I want to do first. So carbon dioxide is the most prevalent greenhouse gas that is anthropogenic. I actually think that that's probably the most important thing I should say next is that part of it. So, and notice I've already paraphrased this into my own words. So I'm going to go ahead and literally write that sentence exactly as how I already wrote it in my paraphrased version of it. So carbon dioxide, actually that'll be lowercase, so we'll fix that later, is the most prevalent greenhouse gas that is anthropogenic, meaning that it comes from human activity. So now we're kind of below the screen, but we're going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit. So now I'm not going to cite it yet because I have one more piece of information from the exact same source. Remember, if you have this from one source and this is from the same source, you only have to cite it after you do the final ones. So the last one I was going to say, fluorinated greenhouse gases are different because they are synthetic and remain active longer. And so I'm going to actually like kind of reduce that down a little bit. So I'm going to be like, on the other hand, let me use my transitional phrases. Actually, I misspelled it. Fluorinated, and I'm probably going to have to lowercase that. Fluorinated greenhouse gases are synthetic and are potent at trapping solar heat. Now, because this is the last piece of information in the paragraph that I'm going to use, now granted, I needed a little bit more room, in fact, one more page, but I'll just go to the next page here. Now, I'm not going to put the period right here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cite the fact that all three of these pieces of information came from the source that has the citation of greenhouse gases. And yes, we're using the British spelling because that's how it was in the database, so we're going to keep it that way. Now, what I need to do next is I need to come up with my last piece of bread. Remember how we talked about, like, so we got bread, topic sentence, meat and cheese, research information, meat and cheese, research. We actually put 3 layers. We have to put the closing sentence here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to flip to the next page. So I've done, there are many types of greenhouse gases that affect the atmosphere. Specifically, examples include chlorofluorocarbons, carbon dioxide, and methane. Carbon dioxide is the most prevalent greenhouse gas that is anthropogenic, meaning that it comes from human activity. On the other hand, fluorinated greenhouse gases are synthetic and are potent at trapping solar heat. Close the quote, then we do the parentheses, period. So now I have to close out the paragraph. So I have to make a decision on what I'm going to say. And the easiest thing for me to do at this point is for my closing sentence, my bottom layer of bread, I ought to just go with, these are the most common greenhouse gases. And that will be, actually we have to put two S's because we're not in Britain. So these are the most common greenhouse gases is going to be my final sentence of that paragraph. So basically when you take your research, what you got to do is you need to consider the fact that A, paragraphs are sandwiches. And when you serve your paragraph, you have a bread, that's your topic sentence. You have meat and cheese, that's your research and information. And then you have a closing sentence. In the case of the one that I just wrote right here, here is our bread. Then these right here all the way are our examples of meat and cheese layers. And then finally, which I got to flip to the next page, this is the bottom layer of bread. So that is essentially the features of a well-written, well-organized, research-based paragraph within the context of writing a research paper. And so essentially you're taking your research and you're trying to present it in a way and talk about it in an organized paragraph by paragraph way, which is why we organized our outline the way that we did. I hope you found this informative, but remember, paragraphs are sandwiches served with bread, meat, cheese, and bread, or you can do another layer of meat and cheese, etc. accordingly. Thank you.